Well, my children, this is going to be tough for me to do this thing, but I'll do my best. My life history and what I remember. Okay, let's start with Grandma, born 1902. She lived in a small farm village in Poland. She was 13 years old in the First World War, and uh, when came, Russian troops came marching through their village, they built a bomb shelter. And the Russian soldier says no. He says, if there's any artillery fire, don't go in there because it cave in on you and kill you. So they took his warning and they didn't. Uh, Grandpa was in a war, and one brother. Uh, and Grandpa had a wagon and a horse, and he used to haul or transport dead soldiers from the front. And one brother of Grandma's died after he came back from the war. So there was Uncle Stanley and Grandma, and I believe there was one other brother. So anyway, uh, a lot of the Polish people were migrating to the United States, and Aunt Sally had a sister that didn't want to go migrate, so Grandma Drazba took her place. So Uncle Stanley and Grandma and Aunt Sally decided to go. Aunt Sophie sponsored them. They borrowed money from the Gajiks to finance the trip. So they they went to the city. They went to the city for their to get their passports and visas uh, for the trip. But they had to wait in line for days trying to get through the paperwork and whatever, and they finally run out of food. So Aunt Sally uh, got on a train and went back to their village to get some food. And she brought it back, and finally they got their clearances and they shipped them to a port where they got on this boat, and they landed in St. John's, Canada. And from there, they were shipped by train to Detroit. And Grandma and Aunt Sally and Uncle Stanley were dumped off, and I imagine it was Dearborn then, and nobody was there to pick them up. And they didn't know where to go. So one station or railroad worker, he seen that they had tags on them, and he asked them where they were going. So uh, he said, well, he had a truck or a car, and he says, get in, I'll take you there. So uh, he took them to Palu's farm, and that's how they got there. So Uncle Stanley and Grandma Drazba, Aunt Sally, they had to repay the loan for their transport to the United States. So Uncle Stanley worked on Palu's farm for a while, and Grandma went to work in the city for uh, doing domestic work. And I'm not sure how long it took them to pay the debt off, but eventually Uncle Stanley uh, went to work in the city, and they finally paid off their debt. And Aunt Sally, I'm not sure what she must have been doing domestic work too. So anyway, Grandma met Grandpa at a picnic, and they went for a while, I guess, and they got married November 18th, 1922. Grandpa was 28 years old. Grandma was 20 years old. Grandpa worked for Ford Motor Company, and things were going pretty well. So he built a house on Warwick Street um, in West Detroit. Then he built another house. He got ambitious, built another house on Springwells in Detroit. And they lived in the house on Warwick, and Uncle Stanley lived upstairs with Frida and Joe Schultz. And the depression was getting bad. Grandpa was without work. Nobody was working. So this was approximately 1933. So on Warwick there, Helen Koza lived across the street, and they had children, Henry and I forgot the girl's name. At that time, I was about 6 years old. So one day I was playing with Henry, and he threw a tin can at me and cut my just above the eye. I still have the scar. So anyway, Grandpa couldn't make payments, the mortgage payments on the house or either house. So he had to let the house go on Warwick, and we moved to Springwells. And so Grandpa was still unemployed, couldn't make the house payments. Well, anyway, on Springwells, we had neighbors, Italian on one side, Ukrainian on the other, and us kids got along fine. We each talked Italian to each other and Ukrainian and Polish, and we all understood each other. So the depression got worse. Grandpa even tried bootlegging, making booze, but that didn't work out. He had to drop that, and of course you still have the still there. And Virginia and Stella were going to Polish English Catholic school. I started school, kindergarten, in 1934. 35, I started school at the Polish Catholic school. And the teachers were tough. If there was any disturbance, they had a three-cornered ruler, and they'd rap you on the wrist. And see, that was 1934, 35. Okay, I had a paper route, Polish paper route, Polish dziennik, and I'd make a few pennies on that. But the depression was so bad that we were going to lose the second house, and so Grandpa made a deal. He traded the house for the farm, and there still was a $3,000 mortgage on the farm. But anyway, Grandpa used to, while we were still in the city, Grandpa would have to scrounge up firewood, to keep the house warm and the kitchen range. And he used to go on the railroad and pick coal that fell off the cars or wood, any kind of scrap wood. And the railroad dicks would chase them and hit them over the head. So things got pretty bad. So we finally moved from there October 31st on Halloween night, 1936. We moved to the farm. Well, it's 59 years ago now. Anyway, we had no light, no heat. Grandpa worked for a while, and he commuted by train weekends. He would come home on weekends and live in the city during the week. We didn't have a cow or chickens, and winter was coming. It was exciting exploring the English-style big barn with the basement and cow stalls and a chicken coop. We had a smokehouse, and we had a creek running alongside the house there, and a duck pond. Well, in a duck pond, when it froze over, I used to slide around on it, and then we had a dog. He would slide with me, and that was our entertainment. And we had an artesian well. The well was over by the road, quite a distance from the house. So we had to carry our water, and it was a good well, spring-fed. And Virginia, Stella, and I started school at a two-room schoolhouse, grades 1 through 8. We had two teachers. One taught first grade through 4th, and the other taught 5th grade through 8th. So next door to us, farmhouse, we had neighbors lived in a stone house. They had a cow. I would go every morning and buy milk for, I don't know what we paid for a pitcher full. Our farmhouse had wood or coal burning cooking stove in the kitchen and a pot belly in the front room for heating. Well, first spring 1937, we planted some garden and stored potatoes, cabbage, and other vegetables for the winter. Grandpa lost his job in the city. Depression was still on. No jobs. Anyway, we needed a horse, so Uncle Tony and Grandpa went to buy a horse. And in about 2 months, the horse died. So here we are without a horse again. And we raised a few chickens, ducks, geese, and pigs. Grandpa bought another horse, which almost killed him because Grandpa was out in the field working him, and he started to run. He was a runaway. So he ran all the way from the 40-acre section, all the way home and right straight into the barn. So we got rid of him. And Uncle Stanley sold his store and bought a farm on Sibley Road. Grandpa couldn't meet the mortgage payments. The mortgage holder threatened to foreclose. Uncle Stanley came to the rescue. He bought out the mortgage. Now we made payments to Uncle Stanley when we could. Grandpa got work on WPA. It was a government-sponsored work program. And I believe he made $6 a week. And so he had to buy a car to get to the workplaces where the WPA worked. And he went to the Port Huron, to the bank, to borrow $35 to buy a car. And so he finally got the loan, and he had to learn how to drive because Grandpa never drove before. He drove very poorly, I'll tell you. So anyway, Uncle Stanley decided to go back to the grocery business. They had a cow and a horse and wagon. So he gave us, he said if we come and pick the horse and the cow up on loan, we could have them on, until Uncle wanted them back. So anyway, Uncle brought the wagon one time, pulling it behind the car, and we had to hire a man with a truck, and I guided him to Uncle's farm, which was about 80 or 90 miles away. So now, anyway, we got there and picked up cow. Cow was named Bessie, and the horse Katie. Katie took to me real quick, like her and I were buddies. She didn't look like a horse, like a workhorse. She had very thin legs and black, completely black. And I would ride her bareback, ride her out to the 40 acres and back and so on. She was a great little horse. When I'd come home from school, Katie was waiting at the gate. And I always try to get her an apple, a carrot, or a little goodie, and she enjoyed that. Then one winter, Grandpa got an infection in his hand and got blood poisoning. He was taken to the Marine Hospital and was there for about 6 to 8 weeks or more. So we struggled on the farm with no income, no firewood. We needed firewood, and there was a WPA crew working on Yeager Road, and Grandma says, go and see if they would give us some firewood for the stoves. So I went, but I cried. I didn't want to go. So one of the men, I told them what was the problem, and they cut some wood for us and even brought it over, which we were thankful for. Then the same winter, Bessie, our cow, was pregnant. And lo and behold, one cold evening, she started to deliver. I helped Grandma with delivery, and it was cold in the barn, so the calf fed on her, got some milk, and then we wrapped him in blankets and took him on a sled to the house. So the calf slept the night in the house so it wouldn't freeze. Well, now Bessie had a lot of milk to feed her baby and plenty left over to make cheese, butter, and buttermilk. So that way we had some extra food, you know. We were in good shape there, but couldn't make the mortgage payments. Slowly we planted a garden, sold a few veggies and eggs, sold tomatoes for 50 cents a bushel, eggs for 11 cents a dozen, and so we got by somehow. Some friends of Grandpa's brought us a dog from the city, a collie. She was like part of the family for us. She'd follow Grandma to the barn, the chicken coop, always at her side. And one day, Jen, Stella, and I were walking on the road. And there was two cars coming in opposite directions. And so the dog got scared, and he got in between the cars, and of course he was killed. We all cried because she was such a good dog. So we planted cuke, sold to the pickle factory, back-breaking work, picking pickles. So we got a few bucks from that. The duck pond we had by the house in the winter froze over, and I'd skate on it and slide, and the dog would grab hold of a rag or something. I'd pull him and let him go, and he had a ball, so did we. In the summer, the turtles got in, snapping turtles got into the pond. And we had ducklings and gooselings, and the turtle would grab a duck by the foot, pull him under, and drown him. And of course, he'd eat him. So I had to hunt him down. I shot him with a .22 rifle and then chopped him up. So that took care of the turtle. Stella and Jen went to work in the city. Jen went to my Uncle Stanley. She was going to school and helping in the store and with the housework. And Stella worked for a marketplace, like where we sold vegetables. So I was left on a farm by myself. So we slowly, from Bessie's calf, and then bought a couple of small calves. We got about 3 cows, and finally grew to about 6 or 7. Bessie was the boss. She would bunt all the cows into place when they were in the back 40. She made them march in single file, and if any of them got out of line, she would bunt them with her head. So we milked cows by hand. The cows had to be milked morning and in the evening, and that was all by hand. That was quite a bit of work. Grandpa bought what they call a doodlebug. It was front end of a Model A and a truck axle in the back. And we used it as a workhorse. We hauled hay and did a little bit of worked the ground, and it was quite a help to us. We had to store hay in the winter or in the summer for the winter. And we had to raise some corn, oats, and feed for the chicken cows. So things were coming along fairly well. One day I became sick. I was delirious for, I don't know, I don't remember, 3-4 days or more. What happened, I got an infection. And I laid in bed till I got better, and the fever left me. But later on, I found out I had a thorn in the pad of my foot. It was about 3 inches long. And I think that's what started the infection and fever. Well, in 1942, I started high school, and the bus came by to pick us up every morning and brought us home in the evening. First day at the high school, the girls would be standing by the bus and checking out the guys. And so I went to Marysville High School. And by this time, the war had started, and jobs started opening up. And Grandpa found a job in a foundry in South Park. It's a subdivision of Port Huron. Now we had income, mortgage payments were met, things were getting better. But they weren't getting better for me and Grandma on the farm. Had to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, milk the cows, cool the milk in the milk house, and get it ready for pickup. And put the cows to pasture in the summer or feed them in the barn in the winter. I had to wash up, eat breakfast, and catch the bus to school. That went on for 4 years through high school. I couldn't participate in any of the after-school activities. I had chores to do. It was a lot of work and very little plays. Once in a while, I'd skip school half a day in the afternoon, miss the afternoon classes, and I'd go to town to see a movie in Port Huron if I had 25 cents. I didn't have a car, so no dating. Let's go back 4 years. I was 14 years old, and I got my driver's license. Farm boys could do that at the time. We had some tree stumps in the field where we wanted to cultivate. So Grandpa decided we have to get rid of the stumps, so I drove Grandpa to a farm where they sold dynamite. So we bought some dynamite fuse and detonators and about a half a sack of gunny sack full of dynamite. And so here we put in the back seat of the Model A, going down bumpy roads. Dynamite was bouncing up and down, but we got home all right. So we went out in the field to start blowing stumps. In the back 40, Grandpa had no knowledge how to blow stumps. From what I read, you had to dig a hole at an angle to reach the center of the stump, then place 1 or 2 sticks of dynamite with the detonator